All right, we are live. Welcome to Social Selling Hour, SS Hour. It's August 25th. Myself and, of course, the brains behind the operation, Rachel.
Hey everyone.
So today we're talking a little bit about social business, a little bit about content, and lucky to have a guest on that Rachel and I have known for a while, done lots of Google Hangouts with, and playing with not only with the tool but also learning from kind of his business strategy and such. So we're kind of honored to have Vidar on today and joining us. So welcome, Vidar.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be here.
All right, so we're talking some content, we're talking some social business. So before we get into question one, just give us a little bit of your background, your experience there, and kind of just something about your company as well.
Sure. I'm serial entrepreneur, which is another word for I don't give up when I have an idea, and I push everything I can to bring it to life. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's just the way startups work. And between my startups, I have also had regular jobs as a VP of marketing for JP Morgan. I was a strategist for Ogilvy. I was a chief product officer for Conversion. But my heart is in startups, and my latest startup, Metal, is a content marketing platform that helps organizations showcase their subject matter experts.
I'm talking to the mute button again. Sorry, it's
Hey, I was struggling to find mine. Well, that's a great lead-in. Big fan of Metal, and so we'll go straight to question one. Why is quality content so important for social business success?
Well, I think there are a few ways to look at this. Today, customers have access to so much information, and they use that information to educate themselves on the marketplace before they even decide who they put on the shortlist. So a lot of companies, they don't see a buying signal until somebody raises their hand and says, I'm actually interested in your company. But at the point they do that, they've already put you in your shortlist, but the problem is you don't get on that shortlist unless there's a lot of content that leads that prospect to you. So I think research shows that buyers are 60 to 70% down the purchase funnel when you actually get to know them and when they show their face, so to speak. And the only way for you to actually be part of the shortlist is to have content do the selling for you, so that you, when they come to you, can turn on the charm and really show them that you're worthy of their attention. But you can't get there without content, and this is why content is so important, and quality content is so important.
So when you're talking quality, because I think that's a really valuable point there, especially from the quality content, not just the random link dropping spam that is often the case of what someone considers content sharing. And I think it's changing. Like today, I don't think our news feeds are as populated with as much brands or even leaders that are just throwing out their random content. They kind of understand that. But how do you especially from the standpoint of an entrepreneur, how do you tie that quality content to your message? Like, do you have a strategy or a thinking behind that?
Well, I think the most important thing is that you need to be authentic, because if you start talking about stuff you don't know, you will be very quickly seen as somebody who is not genuine, and if you're not genuine, you're not going to build relationships that breeds a kind of trust that makes people want to give their money to you. Trust is key to to everything when it comes to marketing and sales, because everybody knows that if they're making a wrong buying decision, their jobs might be on the line. So building trust is number one, and the only way to do that is actually to stay true to what you know, be honest what you don't know, but most importantly, show that you're all about helping your customers. If you can show that you are there to service them, and you can demonstrate that before they become a customer, then you have built the kind of trust that makes them think, I wonder what kind of support I will get when I do become a customer. Because if you are giving this much away for free, then they can, they can only imagine the kind of service they will get once they get your full and undivided attention.
Yeah, I think you hit trust, authentic, right? That's like I think those two are like I think that some people are saying it, but I think using content to give that transparent story to make them relate to you is like perfect. That's a great segue for question two. What role does thought leadership play in building that brand, especially when you think of that, those thought leaders that really always kind of leaned on marketing as the only ones that are sharing and producing content. So I think that's a perfect question too for how does that thought leadership play for brands in building a brand?
I think the important thing with thought leadership is that it's a way to show that you don't think of yourself as a commodity. Because once you start not almost respecting your own craft and your own products and your own services, you can't expect others to do it. You need to elevate what you're doing to the point where people realize that what you bring to the table is different from what the competitors bring to the table. If you fail to show that, your services or products are different from others, you have really turned yourself into a commodity, like I mentioned, and at that point, all you're doing is competing around price and not value. In order to compete around value, you need to show that there's more to you and to your organization and services that you provide. And the only way to do that is to show the market what you understand about their market and their situation and their jobs that maybe even go beyond what they know, so that they trust you to, one, not only that you can act and talk like a peer because you understand the challenges, but you can actually help them take a step even deeper into the next level of business for them.
Oh, very well said. So in regards to thought leadership, who should be sharing content for a company to help build that brand?
Well, I think this really depends on where in the marketing, where in the life cycle of the customer is, because for some customers it's all about closing the sale. For other customers it's about getting into the purchase funnel, and they're going to respond to different messages at different times. However, I really think that what's important is that the salespeople and the marketing and PR people, as well as the employees, are all telling the same story in terms of what the brand is and what the company is. Because consistency is very important in order to bring the brand to life in a credible way. Employees can't say one thing and marketing say something else. But I think they all play different roles. We all know that on social networks, people have a lot more credibility than organizations do, because people have social currency and organizations really don't. But at the same time, people building relationships in social networks, the brand message that they are sharing needs to be in alignment with what the corporate marketing people are saying. And I think the biggest challenge is actually finding ways to get the corporate marketing people to embrace the fact that their employees are the most powerful and effective communicators and sharers of those messages, so to speak. And I think that's really where the opportunity is getting corporate communications to actually listen to their employees who are closer to the customers and align their messages with those of the employees. But again, there needs to be one consistent brand across all those brand touches, every group needs to be able to talk to each other and realize what kind of different roles they play in the overall marketing.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. The idea of consistency. I think I'm a big fan of employee advocacy, especially because I came from social business, social employee side, and I was one of those social employees that I think too often we consider consistency meaning the same old stuff, right? So that's a big reason I like Metalit from a tools perspective, is that you're allowing people to share the same content but provide unique insights. So you're getting that value. It's not just seeding every employee with the same link and the same title and the same content, and really what value does that have for amplifying your message? Mm-hmm. But if you're sharing the same content that is along the lines of the message of your brand, and then letting your employees, trusting them to have that authentic voice. I think that's really the power. And with Metallit being able to not only share this content, have a home for it, but also provide your insights. Because too often I think, I always preach that someone's following you on Twitter, or when you're talking about a social selling relationship, they're following you, the person, not the avatar, not the brand that you're representing. So it's important to have your voice. So like from that perspective, when it comes to like employee advocacy, social business sharing, can you just talk a little bit about your experience or your thoughts on how to get those amplifiers, those social employees, sharing more than just the same content?
Yeah, the important part of every marketing is that it's really only authentic when somebody you trust stands behind that message. And I think that when it comes to building a brand around content, it's important that employees stand behind their corporate messaging, but that they pass that on in their own voice so it becomes credible, relatable. The other thing is that they can also find content elsewhere, because nobody wants to listen to somebody who talks about themselves all the time. It's very important that employees feel that they can talk about the industry, that they can talk about things that are not about their product, because the way you build trust and credibility is by showing that you are focused on your customers, and your customers are typically concerned with other things than your company and your products. And so I think that in both cases, it's all about sharing content with your own voice so that you can show that you have the know-how to put yourself into the customer's shoes, whether you're talking about your own products or about their challenges or what's going on in the industry.
No, I think that's spot on. I think that's, in not only that, but, it's that empowering the user. I got a couple from Twitter that, Nick Cicero said, thought leadership is one of the strongest, entries to building a new business relationship, showing that you have value for, that conversation and that relationship that you're building. And then Dave Stein, one of our previous guests, same story, consistency to support the brand is so important. I like the way he used the word support there, because, Jay Baer said a while ago in one of the presentations a couple of years ago that I was a really big fan of, and he's, the idea that, content that helps will always be content that sells, and at the same time, it's that content that helps in a way that is being consistent across your brand, and I think that's, a really important value when you kind of move forward. So this kind of goes right into the next question, which is a perfect one, I think, a hot button topic for lots of things going on right now. Employee advocacy, a hashtag that I always follow. So how important is employee advocacy in a content strategy?
Well, I think the important thing to understand is that customers or companies, like I mentioned, they don't really belong on social networks, and they just ended up there because it was a place where people go. But people are there to find other voices that they can relate to, that they can trust. And the important thing in social marketing and marketing in general is that your organization's representatives, they act and appear as peers of your customers, because customers, they don't want to deal with a salesperson, a marketing person, a product person. They want to deal with somebody who can act and talk like a peer, because when you're a peer, it means that you are on the same ground, you can relate to the same issues, and the only way to do that is to show empathy with your customers, and you can't fake that. And when you are showing empathy and you're showing that you are worthy of having a conversation with them, then it's going to be a lot easier to have conversations around what value you offer as a company to provide products and services to them. So acting like a peer is really the key to a lot of this, and companies can't do that. Only people can do it. And marketing, from corporate marketing becomes a lot more credible when you find a way to bring out the voices behind the products and the services, because at the end of the day, you know that somebody in that organization is going to provide me with a service or with a product, and bringing those people out, at the forefront of your marketing says a lot about the organization's commitment to serving customers in a transparent way, how proud they are of the people they have to serve you. And I think that's really why it's so important to bring employees out and front and not be afraid of what they're going to say. You're already trusting them with millions of dollars in business. Why don't you trust them at the same time to represent the brand in a way that makes your brand relatable to your customers?
And I think that's the foundation there, especially when you talk community. I know Rachel and I on almost a regular basis when we're thinking about we're talking social selling or content or listening, everything comes down. We talk so much about trust and authenticity, and if you can't trust your employees, why would your customers believe that you could trust them enough to provide a good product? And if your employees aren't your biggest advocates, there was a debate on the using the word advocate and having a mission for your brand. I know Rachel, when we were talking about that before, we had some interesting insights just on the advocacy as a whole, don't you think?
Yeah, actually, I had a question. I was going to play devil's advocate. It is such a hot topic, and whether you need to encourage your employees or just kind of empower the employees who are natural advocates. What are your thoughts on that, Vidar? Should all employees be social, or should you at least encourage everyone to be social?
I think that you need to be comfortable being social before you can be effective. And this comes back to training. I think organizations can't just say, here's a tool and expect things to happen. Tools are actually the simplest and easiest part of this whole equation. It's more of a cultural shift that needs to happen. Management needs to trust employees. Employees need to trust that their voices are valued both by the company and the market, and they need to feel comfortable with the culture of Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn or Google. So most of this boils down to education. So I think you shouldn't force employees to participate, but you should really show them the value it has to their personal brand, the value it has to the company when they are proudly representing the brand in an authentic way. And this is there are some digital natives that get this immediately, and those should be your first ambassadors. They will show how it's done. But at the end of the day, the organization needs to be prepared culturally for putting employees on the front lines. And many companies have done it. It's doable, and it always pays off.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I was writing a post today for tomorrow, and I was going through and I was actually talking with a doctor in psychology this morning, kind of talking about the entire philosophy of how leaders and trust and how important that is for culture. And one of the things that I said, and we both started laughing because it was spot on. And most of the time, leaders aren't afraid of these social employees that they're trusting of failing. Although that's the thing that we like to put on there, and everybody's worried about privacy, they're really afraid of success. They're more afraid of these social employees all of a sudden now being glamorous and their personal brand being of value. And the real question is, why would you not want, even if they leave your company, all of these great ex-employees that are doing amazing things that were once in your realm? And as a leader and a CEO, I'm just curious. I know we're both big fans of social employee, Kjell Bergis and Mark Bergis, from a standpoint of how they empower that. But how do you look at that from a leader's perspective?
Well, it is interesting. I've had these conversations a few times where they say, what happens if we invest in our employees and they suddenly become rock stars in the industry? And I don't know where I saw this, but there was another quote where the person said, well, what happens if you don't invest in your employees and they stay in the company and provide absolutely no value? So I think the cat's out of the bag in terms of employees that are naturally social. They will show leadership, and there's nothing you can do to stop that. If you are not an organization that helps those people succeed, you're not going to succeed as a company because you're not going to draw the kind of talent that is going to help drive your organization forward. So it's always been a talent war. Companies have always looked for the best talent. But what that talent is changing, because talent today also needs to be people who are, good social marketers, because those who are will have a much bigger reach and with much greater credibility and effectiveness than your marketing department. You need to cultivate these kind of talent and not be an organization that is afraid what happens if you're successful. You should be afraid what happens when you're not successful. And you should just continue to compete of getting the best talent. And the way you do it is showing that talent that comes to this organization will be put up on a pedestal because we want to show how proud we are of you. And you want to compete on being the best place for talent to showcase their skills.
Completely agree. So this leads nicely actually into question 5, because I'm very curious to know the inspiration behind Metal, because it is a great platform for empowering your employees to be social advocates for you. So what is Metal and what inspired it?
Well, Metal is a platform that lets you editorialize what you're reading and turn that into content. We found that a lot of people have deep subject matter expertise, but they don't really have the skills to write long-form content like blog posts, or they don't have the time to do so. Often the most valuable employee in an organization, is on billable hours, and they need to produce for the organization. And they have a marketing department that's supposed to take care of everything else. But now that we know that employees are a lot more credible than the marketing and PR department, these people are actually your best marketing asset as well. But they have a day job. They should continue doing their day job, and we still want to figure out how can we get some value from these people. And what we realized is that most people in white-collar professions spend about 20% of their day reading information that pertains to their jobs. And we thought, okay, you're making an investment now in keeping up to date in your industry. If you spend another 30 seconds telling your customers what you just read and how this is relevant to them, you can turn that into content. And that's what Metal really is about. It takes, spend another 30 or 60 seconds after you read an article and say, there was something here that I think really is something my customers would appreciate and value, and I'm going to share why I thought so. And by doing so, you can show 20 years of experience in 3 sentences because you picked out something that from an article that you knew was going to be of value to your customers. And that shows a lot of insight, and it's something you can do without having to turn yourself into a full-time marketer.
Because one of the things like Ted Rubin and Tim McDonald, I know are users of the platform. I know when I first was kind of engaging Ted about it, I told him, a lot of times the content that he shares is really valuable, but I want his insight. Like why did he find value in that article? And I always loved it whenever Ted would share in his post and would say, here's my thoughts on this post and Metal it, and I could go in there and really get the thoughts of the thought leader on a piece of content. That's way more powerful than him just dropping the link into my feed, because I would assume that if he shared it, if he found value in it, but by me knowing what was his thought process, I think we get an added element of content marketing, and that's where I think it takes it into thought leadership and so on. So I love that part of the tool. I think I've said that for a long while. It's not about just the piece of content itself. It's about adding your additional insights.
Yeah, and Ted Rubin actually told me that the reason why he loves Metal in particular is that he spends a lot of time commenting on other people's blogs, and he's thinking to himself, I just spent a lot of time reading this, now I'm sharing my content on your blog, but the audience that gets to see my insights is very limited because it's only people who read this blog. With Metal, he could take his commentary and turn that into content of its own. So it's just elevating commentary into new content so that the energy you're spending on having an opinion actually becomes evergreen content that points back to you as well as to the source from where you found it.
Yeah, and I think that's, today's posts, I always laugh that Google Plus posts are almost like a mini blog, right? Because by the time you post it in there and you're sharing your insights, and the reason that I think a lot of people find really good value on Google Plus is because it's not just the link. Someone's actually able to go and provide that context and that value. And I think that's really what Metalit's doing, no matter where you're sharing it, right? So it's giving, not only giving you a home, but you're out now able to add the Google Plus context or the Facebook context to the post. And I think that goes perfect for question 6. You know, for sourcing quality content is one of the biggest hurdles for social sellers. So that, you know, we've heard that multiple times. I was listening to a podcast earlier that Greg and Kevin were doing, and they were talking about their use of Feedly and some RSS readers, and really how can you spend time in the morning and find that valuable content. So question 6 there with, you know, how can Metalit help the social seller not only find quality content, but also share it?
Yeah, I think the key here is that a lot of people are already coming across content, and Metal really allows you to leverage the content that is in front of you and turn that into a marketing asset. So that's, you know, that's really one way to use Metal for leveraging content you have, and then by following other people on Metal, you're also able to see what they have found that's interesting, right? You know, Metal is not a big social network like a LinkedIn or Twitter, but what it does give you is the opportunity to figure out why somebody found a piece of content interesting. Because the challenge often with things like Twitter is that you see a link and the link is really the title of the article, and there's no editorial context. And you don't know why somebody shared it, what's interesting about it, if it's relevant for you. So Metal allows not only you to share more context when you're sharing, but it also allows you to figure out the context of other people's shares, so that you can figure out quickly, is this piece of content something I should spend another minute on or not? And that's very hard to do on things like Twitter.
And I think we got a question from a statement from Jacob Curtis on Twitter, and I think it kind of plays perfectly in here. Is like, you know, employee advocacy is important, sharing content's important, but you know, how do you make time and get that content in front of those 9-to-5ers or these employees that don't see that as a direct relation to them? And I think you just kind of told the story there, because now rather than just sharing a piece of content or sending an RSS feed, you're putting that story behind it, which was question 1. You know, you're putting that you're putting that consistency around that content, so you can not only see why your fellow employees shared it, but also, you know, what value that had for them moving forward. And I think that's a really important step in content sharing. And something that you said kind of jumped out at me. We were having a debate, and we were talking, I think it was on last week at the end of the week, talking about, you know, how do you, when you're thinking about social selling, how do you find or understand predictive analysis or predicting how someone's doing that? And I always use the term social intelligence, where you're building a story. You want to know why someone posted something. You want to know what groups they're posting, how they're engaging. And I think that's really what you're providing here. You're giving them a lot of social intelligence around a piece of content that never really existed there before.
Yeah, and there's also, you know, the effectiveness of it, because when you're finding a piece of content, right in that moment, when you're thinking about the implications of this with your customers, that's when you should be sharing it, because, you know, an hour later it will be gone. And Metal allows you to take that insight you have and turn it into content, not only to post it on Metal, or can also show up on your corporate site, but now it also goes to your different social networks, so that you're always finding ways to stay in front of your audience. And because often this is more of often a challenge than finding content, is that people who go into you know, start using social and think about social selling, they don't know what to say. And the truth is that there's plenty of content out there. We don't have a problem with lack of content or finding tools that help us find content. We have a problem figuring out how we can make that content work for us. We always think we have to write it ourselves, but frankly, there's a really good stories written in so many trade journals and so many blogs out there that you could piggyback off, because this is content your audience is interested in anyway. Now you can take that and make it your own by saying, you know, yes, there are 20 stories on Mashable today, but here's the one that actually matters to you, and here's why. And so you can use third-party content to build your own brand and drive traffic to yourself, and that's really what we're trying to do around efficiency of leveraging the content that exists, because finding the content becomes easy once you start getting interested in sharing.
No, I think that's a good point. I think not only interested in sharing, but interested in you. Not only are you sharing and providing your insights, but you're also promoting and sharing someone else's view. You're almost getting double the bang for the buck, right? So you're not only agreeing and showing that you understand the market, because I think too often we think about when we promote somebody that we're just giving them all the limelight, but really what it shows is that you have insight and value, and you're connected to the people that are doing good stuff, right? And I think that's too often undervalued in the idea that if we're that tuned in that we don't feel like we have to put the blanket on and do it all ourselves. We think this is a great piece of content. This is valuable insight. Let's leverage that. And I coined this term upcycling with the idea really of taking great content and getting it into your audience in different ways. And that's Medlit is a vital step in that upcycling element, because now I'm able to add insight, share it different directions, share it on different websites as well. And I think one of the ones I wanted to call it, John Golden kind of said, it starts with knowing what your buyer will find valuable before you share or append anything. And I think that's a great comment, because also not only knowing what you as the brand are sharing, but if you're able to go into Medlit and see what your customers are sharing, or why I often use a lot of the other tools. It's great if you see you're following someone on a news feed, but if you're able to see a trend of everything they've posted in recent activities in LinkedIn and build that story so you know what they care about, that's the same thing that you're getting there. So I think that's a powerful kind of weapon. So we'll go into, we're on question 7, I believe. Sharing content triggers conversation. How does adding your own commentary increase engagement? So we kind of talked about a little bit about this, but I guess maybe you can play this devil's advocate that I got this morning. Brian, this is what someone said to me on a Hangout. Brian, no leader or person running their own company has time to do anything with content.
Yeah, and that was really the genesis of Medlit in many ways, because I was struggling with the fact that I could write a blog, but it would take so long that I knew that it was just a waste of even starting on it. And so I was trying to scratch my own itch, because I felt I had a lot of insights that I could share. And if you were to sit down with me and ask me a question, I can talk for hours. Like, a lot of people who have deep expertise in something can talk for hours if you only give them a question. And we wanted to kind of mimic the same thing, meaning that when you read something, that is kind of the question. And the answer becomes a lot easier when you're giving a stimulus, such as an article. And that's how we started actually dealing with that with Medlit, so that even the CEO can spend 30 seconds saying, you know what, this is something that is really valuable to our customers, and here's why. This way you can really show deep insight in very short period of time, because you're adding context to content. And I just love what you said with upcycling. I'm going to start using that.
I like it. That's good. I was so tired of people, having a negative connotation with recycling, because it meant we were taking trash and doing something with it. Yeah. And I like to think of it as upcycling, as we already got great content. Let's just do something better with it. Let's put it in different places. Use different things. And actually, one of the things you said to me, kind of said there, CEO, you're going to be reading content. They're going to be dial it in, and they're going to have insights, right? I don't think I've met very many CEOs that aren't passionate and have their own insights. They probably wouldn't be a CEO if they didn't have those traits to begin with. And like you said, getting out that conversation, getting the reason that you shared something. I often call it the water cooler, right? Because when you go to the water cooler, you go to the lunch, everyone talks about what the latest buzz is, if it's the Facebook Messenger or whatever it is. And if you're able to just take the already published article and then add your insights on it, the time suck that is often associated with content, creating your own blog and writing your own piece, is almost eliminated, because you're just leveraging and kind of adding your insights. So I think that's a powerful one, and the hashtags is kind of like another segue one there. And I know there's some people we have lots of great people going on in the chat today, lots of great dialogue back and forth, and a lot of people talking about leveraging great content, how you add comments. The commenting in blogs is slightly going away from the idea that not as many people add comments, but we want them to add their insight, and I think that's a really good one, kind of leading in there to. I think we're on question 8, Rachel. I think you're on that.
Yes, but quickly I want to give a shout out to Jim Canto, because he had a very short tweet, but it's on point for answer 7. Just simply personalize it as the best way to solicit commentary on your posts. So I think that plays right into one of Metal's strengths. So thank you, Jim, for being so succinct.
Yes, agree.
I need to take lessons from him. I don't know how to talk too much, talk too fast, and tweet too long. Everything's 140 characters, so I mean.
Exactly. You're always retweetable, but not always technically.
that's a good. I'm gonna take that from here. That's for sure.
Okay, question 8. How important are hashtags when sharing content on Twitter, Facebook, and Google+?
So hashtags are great for a few different things. I use them to categorize content because you want to show up in search, and people might search for a certain category of content and they look for hashtags. But it's also a great way to remove ambiguity. If a content can be about this or that, adding the hashtag as a category really helps clarify what your message is and who you're trying to talk to and what your point is. But it's also a great way to express intent. Hashtag help, says a lot. Or hashtag how to indicates that this is something that has instructional value. And also a lot of people use it, and I do this too, to show sentiment. Everything from hashtag fail to hashtag best movie ever, etc. Are ways to really add personality to the 140 characters. So I think some people come up with innovative ways of using the hashtags, but you can always tell what they're trying to do when you see it, because you know that they deliberately put something into that hashtag to add context. And I think the hashtags are great, and just be careful not to stuff too many hashtags into every tweet, because the hashtag isn't the message. It is really just a modifier.
Right. I'm a big fan of personalization. It's always easy to guess the sentiment when you see the fail, particularly on airline tweets. That seems to be really common. But I think I wouldn't see a lot of content if it wasn't hashtagged. As my network's quickly growing, the streams move way too fast. So unless I'm following a specific phrase, I won't see it. So I think from just getting the right eyeballs on your content, you've got to hashtag on the right platforms.
Yeah.
And I was surprised. So I do a quick plug for my iSocial Talks video series that I'm doing, and I'm answering questions from the community on what they want to, what they find value, what I can share, how I can help them in a quick way, because I, of course, like to talk. And so video is easier for me than blogging. And the most popular question, bar none, for a lot of the small businesses that I work with is hashtags. And that surprised me, because I think we live in this world of, Ted Rubin follows, and I use him all the time on this. He follows 120,000 people, but yet he monitors, manages feed, engages, and builds relationships. And often it's because he's following hashtags. And I focus a lot on. I use hashtags to find new followers, find new communities, and of course, we are all fans of Twitter chats, which is really, it's a Twitter chat is not anything without that hashtag. We would just be posting in feeds and have to follow this unknown group of people. And so I thought those comments were, it's spot on with expressing intent. I think if someone takes a long time to make a hashtag that's like that one of those long ones that annoys most people, usually whatever they're saying in that is of some value, and that's a great social selling aspect, because we often talk about trying to figure out what they're not saying in that 140 characters, and maybe they put that hashtag in there to really caveat everything else that they're not able to fit inside that 140 characters.
Yeah. Yeah, it used to be, pictures are worth 1,000 words. I think a hashtag can be worth 1,000 words now.
That's true, and I think I'm using them like this. My daughter looked at me this weekend. I said something to my wife, and she's like, my daughter just looked at me and she's like, "What is this?" I'm like, "Oh, I was hashtag," in conversation. So we'll jump into question 9. So it says, what best practices would you recommend to someone who is just starting to curate and share content? Love this question.
Well, I think there's a misconception around curating, which is that it's just listing stuff. If you're just listing stuff, you're really just adding to the noise. I don't need another list unless I understand the context of the list. I think that the most important thing you can do when you're curating is to take a position. If you don't take a position, that list looks like a random set of links that I don't understand why they're there, or why these stories are bundled together. But if you provide guidance, you are showing expertise. You're saying, I am an expert in this area, and out of the thousands of things I could have told you today, I'm going to tell you 3, and here's why. Then you're adding a lot of value, and it's a skill to be able to synthesize a lot of information into a small, collection of content, and do so well. And this is why people who curate well are offering a great service and demonstrating really deep expertise. And those who don't curate well, they're just adding noise. So I think it's better to think about curation as really a job that shouldn't be taken lightly. It requires analytical skills that sometimes are, hard to acquire. It's almost harder to curate than to write a blog post, because you actually have to take a position on other people's content and understand it.
I love that. I love that.
I think that's really important. I don't know if you ever participated. There was a Twitter chat that Sam Fiorella ran for many years. BizChat, I think, was the hashtag. And one of the, you had to have a stance. You either were in the yes camp or in the no camp. You could never start a tweet or express any sort of wishy-washy opinions. And I think that's really important when you're curating. It either supports your viewpoint or highlights why, maybe this is something different but to be considered. Yeah, analytical skills are important.
Yeah, I think it's also the case of, the people that are really good at content curation today on social media, especially. I think, when on LinkedIn, not only are they able to convey their insights and opinion, but they're also able to make it into a point where they're not telling you that you're wrong. They're just they're going in and explaining, hey, you're seeing it from 2 different views, and here's the reason that I believe. And I think that's different than the way before. I think too often we thought of content curation as just someone that saw a blog that they didn't like, and then they just reshared it and they put on there, because my LinkedIn, I remember it was like 3 years ago when I started on LinkedIn. I remember the only things I saw on there that was of value that someone was sharing was an article that they hated. They would post it talked about the iPhone 4S being the dumbest thing, Steve Jobs had ever done, and they would just talk good. And so I always thought of content curation as, well, it's only if I disagree. But slowly that motto has changed now, and we're focusing a lot more on that, and this is a great quote from BJ Smith, the busy marketer. He said, "Those that don't curate well are just adding noise," from your quote, Vidar. And I think that's an important statement. I think maybe that's the mantra of a CEO that has the time to, rather than add noise to the already noisy world, why not curate and add your own insights to something that's already there? I think that's a huge takeaway from today, for sure.
Yeah, and I appreciate the nods here, because curation has been seen kind of as the ugly stepchild of content marketing. Well, it's really just another tool that calls for very different skills and has very different purpose. But it's one that particularly executives who have little time but a lot of know-how can do very effectively, because it plays on their strengths as industry experts, without requiring the kind of time commitment that creating content from scratch would call for.
Yeah, I also think there's a huge shift going away on a lot of networks where people were pumping something out once an hour, sometimes every 30 minutes. I feel like a lot of people I'm following are scaling back on how much they're sharing and adding commentary and really trying to solicit conversation, which is freeing up the streams, which is refreshing. And then also using tools like Follower Wonk or to identify when is the best time to share, like when are people watching me, to get the best engagement instead of just randomly spewing out content.
I got the hint, Rachel. I'm tweeting too much. that was subtle.
Thank
I'll
God.
take it. Yes, I know. I always feel like I feel bad for followers that have less than. Yes. I know. I need to tone my following. No, I think that's a great point. I think it's not only that if you share less than because too often I think we share, and it's the Guy Kawasaki idea where he shares and reposts 24 hours a day the same things because he wants to hit every time zone. But I often people were complaining about that. But my question was, are the things that he's sharing valuable? And, Chris Brogan had a great quote that I always use from the Proud Free concept is that as long as you're posting value and you're providing value for your followers, post as much as you want, because you know what? It's their loss if they leave you. And I thought that's a unique way of thinking. It takes a lot, because for a long time I was that guy that would go, oh my God, I went from 108 followers to 103. Like, what did I tweet wrong? Like that's the idea. But I think when we're able to curate great content instead of just spewing out lots of useless content, not only are we helping the social community noise, but I think that's a great one. And that probably leads into a perfect, question 10 here. The last 15 minutes we have is, what is your number one pet peeve for content sharing on social networks? Curious to see this one.
Well, I'm scratching my own itch. So I built Metal just because I was really fed up of how much noise that was generated by people who were sharing stuff, and I couldn't figure out why they shared it, why I should care. So, when you share without any commentary or context, you're making me do all the work. You're not doing me a service by sharing content that I have to work to figure out. I don't have the time to figure out what goes on in your mind. You should be doing me a service. If you're sharing something, it can't be for your own benefit. It has to be for my benefit. And if you're going to do something for my benefit, you better do the work for me. And so when you're sharing without context or commentary, you're asking me to do the hard work. I have to admit, many years ago, I would, I'd have nothing to tweet, and then I would find an article on the New York Times that looked really brainy, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to tweet this one. I haven't read the whole article yet, but it makes me look smart, I bet. And I feel that, well, I stopped doing that, but, I feel there's a lot of people who still are like, you know what, let me just share something to make it look like there's something going on in my head. And I think, the emperor has no clothes when it comes to that nowadays, but still people are doing it.
I always laugh at that, because I always say you can't look very smart when someone replies to the article with a question about it, and you go that's the quintessential and it works perfectly. I use that mantra, show you care, because I couldn't figure out a better way of doing what we were doing, and I think it's partially the importance when we talk pet peeves and content sharing. If less is more, and I've never been one that's great at that entire concept of less is more in everything I'm doing, but for me it's the idea of influence kind of plays into this, from my opinion, because when the fact that Tim Cook doesn't tweet very often, and I'll use him as an example, but when he does post, it's valuable, and it's just like Ariana Huffington, when she posts on Google Plus, I'm amazed, and she posts maybe once or twice a day on Google Plus, but that is an influential post. I'm reading what she's sharing. She puts insight. She puts background. If she was sharing 20 times during that day, like some of the other leaders, I probably wouldn't pay attention or provide see as much value in what she's sharing on Google Plus weekly, because I don't think she would put as much effort in there. So I think that's a great one.
Yeah, and my other pet peeve, if I may, is that people are cross-posting the exact same content on different platforms, and it shows that you're lazy. And two, it also shows that you don't understand that people on LinkedIn are different than people on Twitter. The medium itself might allow for more characters on LinkedIn than it does on Twitter, etc. And I think I look at all my different social networks, and I know that I have a slightly different audience profile on each one of them. And a lot of my posts that are business-oriented, I stopped pushing to Facebook, because most of the people that respond to me on Facebook, they're not there to respond, to engage with me on my business content. It's to show my personal side. It's for them to show their personal side. So if I find an article, let's say, about how the music industry is changing, I might find that same article interesting to my business context and my personal context, but my personal context, I might want to share this with different context about how this is changing, how they are buying and consuming music. And then on LinkedIn, I might talk about the implications for the industry around this. I'm sharing the same content, but I'm kind of prefacing it and putting it in different contexts for different audiences. And so we designed Metal to do that as well. That if you find one piece of content, you can still share it with different audiences with this different intro, so to speak. So you get more effectiveness out of that. But if you're just cross-posting the same stuff, then you're really signaling that you don't really care for the culture of either network, which will get people to tune you out.
Yeah, that's pretty much my all-time worst pet peeve when people push their Twitter feed to Facebook and LinkedIn with the, even before hashtags, it was just, it was useless. So no, you definitely need to frame it appropriately for the network if you're actually trying to engage with people.
And I'm actually trying to tweet out the. I just took a screenshot of that element of Metal-It because it's by far my personal preference. My favorite thing that I remember, I think a very first version that you guys ever demoed to me a while ago. I loved that I could customize my message per platform, and not only because I hate 140 characters in my Facebook feed, but you hit it spot on. When someone asked me, and this is a conversation I had this morning, they said, Brian, we want you to build us a social media strategy, and I counter back with, I want to build you a strategy for each network, and I'm going to build you a strategy for your community because, I mean, not only as a personal brand do you have different followers on different networks, but as a brand, and I like looking at these ones that are the ones that are always set on the platform at the plateau of greatness, like, what you see what Zappos posts on LinkedIn and what Zappos posts on Facebook, they're a great example of not the exact same thing, not the exact same context. And if they're going to share the same article, they'll have different lead-ins, where it's more of a fun lead-in on Facebook and it's more of a business value proposition on LinkedIn. And I think too often we think of it as, I love that point that you made. I'm going to make sure to tweet out that, because that was one of my favorite parts of Metal-It, is that I could take that one piece of content, add unique insights and lead-ins and elements into each social network.
Yeah. No, I agree. And the thing is that there are some tools out there that are, not really helping. So I love Buffer, I really do. But often when I retweet something, it asks me, hey, do you want to retweet this to all these other networks as well? And I'm thinking to myself, do I have the time to create another post or share this in a different way for a different social network? And most of the time I do. Because of this, it shows that you understand that these networks are different. But this is where technology can get in your way as well. Some technologies make it too easy to be lazy, and it shows. So again, technology versus culture. You need to understand, the environment that you're operating in, and use technology to help you be more effective and not be more lazy.
Yeah, that's one of my my pet peeve, especially on the social business tools. I made it a point, and the tool that I deployed last was that you weren't able to comment on the actual post until you clicked on the link. The comment section would not populate in our social business tool because too many times someone would read the title or, based on the comments that existed below, assume they know what they're doing or assume that they're comments. And so I made it, if they, granted they could go around the system, they'll click the link and then go back to it, but at least then it's, making someone take that step, because not only do I want someone to read the content, but they should know enough about it to kind of engage and kind of take the next level.
Yep.
All right, I was going to pull, Rachel, I was going to pull a couple, there's a couple of good ones on from Twitter. We have a great community on Twitter today, and 20 plus people that have jumped into our the Google Plus today, not to see us, but because of our great guests. So that is a
Oh, it's all
pleasure.
you, Brian.
No, trust me, we'd be crickets. And a couple of the things that are kind of coming across here, talking to everybody. It seems like almost everybody here is in the same camp where they don't like cross-sharing. They don't like the idea that they're seeing a Facebook link inside of a Twitter, and even the idea where as much as I love Google Plus and the engagement, I always struggled with the reason I loved Google Plus is because people had to take the time to post there because there wasn't an automated engine, and then there was things like F plus where it was then taking your Google Plus posts and shedding it all across all the other networks, which then I think kind of made it backwards there. But I guess my question for you, the last 5 minutes we have, when you think about content curation from a sales perspective and really where social selling is going, how do you see the social seller of tomorrow really using not only tools like yours but tools to really show their thought leadership?
Well, I think when it comes to selling, at the end of the day, it means that you need to actually push some product or services, and this is where the salespeople are getting the shocker, which is that they just can't do the same old cold calling anymore. Nobody's picking up the phone unless they think that it's going to be worth their time. And how does a prospect think it's worth their time? Is because you built a relationship and trust with them ahead of time through content. And this is where the challenge and opportunity is because it's a challenge because sales and marketing people have typically done different things. Marketing people have done content, sales people have done lunches. And now you have to take the content and the social and bring it together, and the salesperson always needs to front it. And when it comes to social selling, that salesperson needs to now get involved a lot earlier in the sales funnel and build themselves a reputation. And this is where content curation can come in, because they don't have the time, like most business professionals, to take on a marketing job in addition to their sales job. But here's a quick way to do it, because as a salesperson, you should always be focused on what's going on in the industry, what's going on with your customers. If you're a good salesperson, you do that. You focus on the customers rather than your own product. And if you are spending effort educating yourself about customers and their needs, it's very easy to turn that into content that you curate as you're educating yourself. And what we focused on with Metal is that, you know, if you use an enterprise version of Metal, you are able to drive all the traffic from your creation into your company's page, into your company's site, and there you can, you know, employ all kinds of lead generation mechanisms. You know, most companies are very good at figuring out what to do with a visitor once they get to their site, but getting them there is a challenge. So we are solving the problem that when a salesperson is spending time educating themselves on the market and turning that into content through curation or other tools, what we wanted to do is make sure that that traffic goes back to the salesperson profile page, to the company's page, so that everything leads into you know, getting the user into, or the visitor into, the sales funnel. So for salespeople, content is going to be something they can't avoid. It's going to be the foot in the door that separates them from everybody else, and there's no escaping from content, I'm afraid.
I think that's. I mean, not only is that great, but I think your insights and view on this. We're going to have a hangout for our social selling hour. We want to do kind of like a panel where we talk kind of SEO and the value of SEO when it comes to social selling, and because too often I think that's part of the conversation on why someone feels they can only blog because the blog is on their website, and that's where they want the SEO there, and we know we want people. That's where our call to action and some of our things are at. And I think what Metal it's able to do there, from that enterprise element, being able to embed in your solution, and also, you know, it's that social SEO as well, as, you know, having a home for everything you've shared. That's some great value there, and I think that's an entire topic. I think that's of true value for the social selling community for sure. So we'll definitely have to have you back on to talk that angle, because I think that'd be a fun debate.
Absolutely.
For sure. We'll have to. I just actually watched one of those Gary Vee talks, and he talked about someone had a question about SEO, and he had a really clever quip, something like, you know, you don't need to convert or drive them back to your website every time. It's just about, you know, building that trusted advisor status, which I think some people are really still struggling with.
Yeah, I think that's hashtag #AskGaryVee is his YouTube channel. I think it's a great value there. He's doing some cool things. That's cool to see that. And apparently, while we were on here, the Twitters broke, because yes. I saw a bunch of people telling. So thankfully we're doing Google Plus Hangout, because now we've just provided a unique value that while Twitter was down, we still had here, so people can watch the replay of this conversation and, you know, gain some of these really great insights. You know, I think this was a great talk, because I think there's lots of debates on content, and content seems to be a popular even across Twitter chats, and you know, it's something that lots of people are talking about. I think the way that not only you look at it, but also from Metallit, and how the idea of curation versus just content created as a brand solely, I think is, you know, it's a completely change in thought. And as someone that has a passion for change, I love that idea. I love that we're changing the way that people think about content curation. Instead of it being something you do after you have run out of all the blogs that you could post for a week, it is now something that not only senior leaders can do and social leaders can do, but it's also something that can take less time and almost add more value. And I think that's a really great lesson from today's conversation. Well,
thank you. That's a great takeaway, and I really appreciate the chance to share my passion for this with you and your community.
Yep.
The honor was all ours. Yeah, see, we're on the same spot. I just need a bookcase now, because my little bookcase compared to both of you guys who have nice bookcases like wooden I have like a hole in the wall. It looks like someone cut it out. So I need to, for our next chat, I have to upgrade my my background bookcases. But
Yeah, get yourself down to IKEA, son.
yeah, good. Now, but I want to thank everybody on the community side, especially those on Twitter that weren't on Twitter, so you're watching the replay of this. But not only was there some great engagement, but we had lots of brands jumping into the chat, sharing their insights. Movi being one of the ones from the tools, of course, Metalit was in there. We had the idea that not only this many people are talking about social selling and understanding the idea of the importance of content and blogging. I think it's a good sign. The community not only caring this much, but believing in it. And we had Lisa Hines on there giving some insight. I love one of her comments about making sure that we aren't plagiarizing and we're citing our sources. That's another great thing of Metalit is that we can have things auto added in, and you can see who I'm referencing and I'm talking about. Too often, someone will add insights to a post and they won't include the actual link or the content or the right person. So I think that's of great value as well. So this was our pleasure. We definitely have you back on again for another panel talking just about everything that you did and I guess any last thoughts for the community before we sign off for the Monday?
Nothing else than rethink how you spend your time creating content versus curation. You should always create as rich and deep content as you can. You should blog if you're able to do so, but curation just plays a different role, and it's something that you can do while you're doing something else, because it really goes hand in hand with your content consumption, and it turns that so much more valuable to you and your community.
Awesome.
Well, thank you again, Vidar. It was a true honor to have you on. Thank you to everybody on Twitter, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you.
Actually, next week we're off, right? Or next week we're
right.
off.
Holiday.
Holiday.
Enjoy the holiday.
Didn't click button. Next week we're off. We'll make sure to put out a note there. I will be enjoying the gorge, watching Dave Matthews there up in Seattle, Washington. But we will see you in 2 weeks. Social Selling Hour is out.